Hey guys, I know it's been a while, but life has a thing. It gets busy, and yeah, well, oh. Alright, so since I've been gone, 2.8 has been fully released. Anyone who has Blender attached to their Steam account would have been forced into using 2.8 now. Now, I will leave links in the bottom of the description when I upload this to YouTube, but so you can always revert back to 2.7 if that's your preferred usage. So what the Blender community did, or programmers, is they tried to make this more user friendly as far as navigation goes, and more or less time consuming for professional developers. So that is the major difference between the two applications and software changes. So, in the old version, if you wanted, say, to do a character scene for an animation, you would have to do each character separately in the movement in pose mode, whereas with the newer Blender, you can do both characters at the same time. So that saves anyone who might be making videos with Blender a lot of time. Another thing that they did was the pen over here, you can actually write and turn that into a three-dimensional object inside of this version of Blender, where you couldn't do that prior. So everything's been moved around, and yes, when you first look at this, it is very intimidating, but everything is still there. It's just in a lot of interesting places. Let's just put it that way. So first time opening up 2.8, you'll get a splash screen, and if you were using 2.7 prior, it will ask you if you want to transfer your settings from 2.7 over to 2.8, which basically clones your hotkeys. So instead of you opening up the new version of Blender and using the new preset hotkeys, which are very different, by the way, you can elect to merge your hotkeys from the old program into the new one. So if you're an old user walking into this, I would highly recommend doing that, because trying to re-memorize the newer hotkeys is going to take some time and make your workflow take longer. Whereas newer users just walking into the program won't have that issue. So the first thing that we're going to do, because we'll be doing this for Planet Coaster, is we're going to close this window because I've already set up my settings there. And you can ignore your light, and you can ignore your camera if you want. Your camera, you really only use that to make your icon for your thing, but most of us like to cheat and just take a screenshot and then edit the screenshot. So just to clean up our scene here, I'm going to go ahead and delete my camera and then delete my light, because I don't need them. So as far as navigation goes in the newer setup here, you can now use this toggle here to get your directions instead of using your number pad. So that's what this little gizmo over here is for. This is for changing your X, Y, Z's. So looking at it from the top, from the X-axis and the Y-axis. You can also do the in-betweens, which is these ones here, or polar opposites. And if you scroll over it, you can still see your hotkey is labeled there as shortcut. Okay, so another thing that they changed is instead of having your transforms bar down here, everything is now up here at the top. And your transform tools are right here instead of being in a bar down here. So this is your box selection tool, your cursor, the 3D cursor there. Move, rotate, and scale. It's all right there. Up here in the sidebar, you no longer have all that information that used to be here. So that changed. Now, you won't see your transforms until you select the object. So now you see it says item. There's where your transforms are. If we push A, which is the old hotkey, and turn that off, it's still there now because that item was actually selected in the scene, and it is selected over here. You'll notice that the camera and the arrow and all of that stuff is no longer shown here. You can turn those back on. Another major change they made is now you can filter out what you want to see in your scene. So mesh, curve, surface, metadata, text, grease pencil, which is what I was talking about earlier about how you can draw things on your screen and turn into a three-dimensional object. You could do that with your grease pencil now, whereas you couldn't do that before. So you could actually sketch out a scene with your grease pencil here and then turn that into a 3D object. So that's a nice little feature that we have now. If you're doing animation, you can filter out your armatures. Let us empty the light. We deleted that, so that's pointless. We deleted our camera, so that's pointless. And the speaker and light probe is for if you're doing animation for like a cartoon. Right here, you can turn off your gizmo so you can't see it. And your navigation. In here is where you can turn your grid off. So that's where it's at now. So when you're taking your screenshot, you're going to come up here to your viewport and turn that on and off for taking your screenshots if you're going to go that route. To go from wireframe back to solid mode is still Z. And now this little toolbar pops up and you can select it. So you could push Z and then your hotkey 4, or Z and then 6. So that's how it's done now instead of toggling between. Blender Render got replaced with Eevee engine. And what that engine is you can now render as you work. So now instead of having to make the thing and then now to render something you have to have the camera in the view here. We deleted our camera so we won't be able to do that, but you can render in real time now as you're modeling, which is a really nice feature. they took away the grouping system, so now when you push M, you're setting up scene collections, and then you put your objects within each collection, and you can name each collection separately. So they, if you've ever used Photoshop before and you've used the groups option, this mechanic right here works very similar in that fashion. So I'm going to delete this, pushing X and delete. So get this stuff out of the way. So now you're like, okay, well, where the hell are my primitives? I don't see them down here anymore. Well, they're up here at the top. And you go object, or sorry, add, mesh, and whichever mesh you want to start with. If you're, like a couple of times when I do my projects here on stream, I do animals and I use background images. And I used to use the sidebar on 2.7 over here, but that has since changed and been moved to the add. And you put image, and you can either use the reference, which whatever your viewport is currently positioned in, if you use reference, then it'll throw the image in the direction that you're referencing. So that comes in handy when you are, say, trying to figure out how to sculpt the different angles of a face. Then you can bring in a background image for the different angles of that face and reference it in wireframe, which is nice. And then this is the old background version where it throws the image that you're referencing from in the background, and only when you're in either the x-axis, the y-axis, or z-axis do you see the image, and then it disappears if you scroll around. So that's where that got moved to. And then you can bring your camera back and your speaker, and but yeah, for the most part you'll be going up here to add, mesh, and selecting what you want to add to your scene. So in 7.9, you would go up here to UV editing and then do your UV editing. But in this version, UV editing has changed quite a bit. Really, the best way to go about UV editing in this version of Blender is to bring your time bar up and then change this to UV editing. And then we'll change object mode here into edit mode. And then over here, now all of the individual filters are icons now, instead of it being, words. So your knife tool is still there, your smooth tool, edge slide, shear, rip region, loop cut, bevel, inset faces, extrude, that's all here now. Your face, vertex, and edge tool is now right up here at the top. So for this particular simplified demonstration, I've selected my faces, all of the faces are shown, and now it's being shown down here in UV editing. Whereas if I use the actual UV editing here, it's going to do the split screen. But it won't update this unless you're actually in edit mode. So in 2.79, you could go into object mode and then see with the object selected your UV map, but that's no longer the case anymore. Now you have to actually be in edit mode with the object selected to see what's going on in your UV map. And the reason why they took that feature out is because of Eevee. Since you're doing real-time rendering, uh, it messes with the way that the software is set up. So it needs to be in edit mode when you're UV editing for this to update. But so you could still use your hotkeys like before, but 2.8 has made it so you don't have to use your hotkeys so much anymore. It's more user friendly. So now they're actually over here. Grab, which was the G key, relax, and pinch. And then all of the selections are up here. So you have your vertex, your edge, your face, and your island tool is all up here. You still can middle mouse click on your menu up here and slide it if you need to see the extra stuff. Alright, so this is pretty much UV edited on its own at this point. So I'm just going to go into UV editing. And instead of the menus being down here, remember they're at the top now. So drag this over. UV. Export UV layouts. Now in the bottom of the menu instead of at the top. It used to be at the top, but now it's at the bottom. This looks very, very intimidating, but they just added a few new things that are helpful for motion animation. So that's not really going to relate to you in TMTK, so you just stick to your basic menus. Yes, they changed the icon, but this is your general options like it was before, which you won't ever use. You didn't use that in 2.7, so you won't use it here either. And then here's that. In 2.79, this was a cylinder and a ball and a sun. Now it's a cone, a ball, and a circle. And this is where you change your units to metric. By default, it's now metric. And then your unit scale to 0.01. So now that our units are correct, we can see that this cube is super tiny. And since we are currently in object mode, we can just push S to scale it. And then do 1M. S. Now, anytime you do something in this, it pops up a memory bar or an action bar. So you can go in here and you can refine what you did. Now, this right here is in centimeters. So I'm going to change this to 1 meter each. Or not, because it's a string. Okay, fine. I'll do it in centimeters then. There we go. Now it's exactly 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. So this they added to make your modeling process faster. Because now instead of you having to push scale and then play with the sidebars and then go over here and then go back and then go over here and mess with it, now it memorizes what your last action is and gives you a menu so you can fine tune what you last did. So that's a nice little feature that they added. Okay, so here's the clip start. You go into view, and then clip start, and then change this one, because see this gray in the background? If my object was bigger, then that would be super annoying, so I'm going to change this to 50M. I don't need it any bigger than that, because let's face it, TMTK items are 8 meters, so you don't really need anything bigger than 50 meters view distance. Some other tutorials will tell you you need 100, but you don't need 100. Because you have to remember that the larger you make your clipping space, the more space you're rendering. And if you are using Eevee, then you're doing real-time renders within that distance. And if you have a lot of polygons that you're rendering with all of this blank space in the void, you're going to experience slowdowns when you're modeling. So only do your clipping with what you actually need, and don't overdo it. So so now if you were to freeze all transforms to get your scaling back, that's done up here. And object, make sure you're in object mode. Transforms, it changed, but they call it set origin now. Instead of going to transforms and then picking your 3D cursor, you go set origin, origin the 3D cursor. If that's what you want it to do, to make sure that your origin is on the ground. And then your apply, now you can apply all transforms, and that will do location, rotation, and scale all at the same time. Whereas in 2.7, you had to do scale, rotation first, and then go back and do location. Now we get to do them all at the same time, and that sets it up for you. So that's nice. So in the event, excuse me, let's switch this over to edit mode for us real quick. Okay, so if you wanted to edit your normals or see your normals, you have to be in edit mode, and you go to view, I believe. Like I said, they changed a lot of menus around, so if you wanted to change your shading for, say, smoothing groups, then you would do that in each individual one here. But here's your normals right here. And then all of your normal manipulation is done in here. So flip, recalculate outside, recalculate inside. Obviously you'd want to have, the face selected before you do that, but yeah, that's where it went, is up here in these options. And then the shading, is right here now. So smooth faces, flat faces, smooth edges, and smooth verticals is all in this mesh menu here. Um, right here where it says weights, this is applying to your normals. So you actually have a more powerful tool when it comes to smoothing groups and fixing your normals with 2.8. You can actually apply weights to your normals. What that means is, like in my previous tutorial, which is archived on my YouTube channel, I go over how we had to fix a cylinder by creating a hard edge at the top and bottom to make sure that it's correctly shaded around the actual cylinder part and that the flat stayed flat. Well, now you can add shading or smoothing weights. So you put a higher weight on the top and a lesser weight on the sides, and then that'll fix your shading for you. And another tutorial, once I get even more comfortable with this new layout, then I'll go over smoothing groups again in this version of Blender. Because this newer program gives us a lot more options, and it actually speeds up our work process and our workflow. Um, for instance, like I said at the beginning of the video, you can have multiple separate meshes in here and work on them all at the same time instead of separately. So for instance, instead of using Decimate and creating janky LODs, you can have all your LODs in the scene and make an adjustment to those to make your LODs look better while all of them are loaded into the scene, which is really nice because that speeds up your workflow. You don't have to click on each one individually, hide certain ones, and then work on them blind. You can actually view everything in the scene at the same time and make the adjustments with every individual objects. So that's really a nice feature there. So by default, your scene is in Eevee rendering mode. So before, Blender used to load up in Blender render. Now it's Eevee. If you ever wanted to change that, say render engine is right here in the camera options. You can change Eevee to cycles, which is what Frontier uses. So you could change it to cycles if you wanted to. Eevee's more powerful than cycles, and with exports that I've done so far with Eevee, I haven't had any issues in TMTK. So if you want to use Eevee, then go ahead and use Eevee, because Eevee and Cycles Rendering both use nodes for their material systems. So you can use either one. It doesn't matter anymore. It used to in 2.7. Blender Render is a different texturing workflow than Cycles Render. But with Eevee is actually better because you're doing your materials in real time, whereas Cycles is when you click render, then that's when it renders. So you don't have to change Eevee over to Cycles, but if you want to, you can. Because say you want to work on this and you don't want it constantly rendering. Maybe, your computer's got a whole bunch of things going on in the background, or your computer just can't keep up with the amount of polys that you're working with within the scene. Then just change it over to Cycles, and then it won't be rendering while you're working, and then you'll be able to work without the jitters and whatnot. So going over here to materials, so this one right here is now the materials thing, and you just add it like you used to and change the name right there. And then right here where it says base color, you would change that to an image texture. And then load your image into here, which I'm not going to do because I didn't create the UV or any of that for this particular show off, because we're just basically diving into 2.8 from 2.7 and looking at the differences and comparing the programs. Alright, so I've uploaded 2.79, so as I was referencing things, if you've never used 2.9 before, you're probably like, what the hell is he talking about? Alright, so this is 2.79. Anyone that's used 2.79 prior knows what this is. Now, my particular scene here is loaded default to work for TMTK. So I have my entire scene preset for working in TMTK. So, as you can see in object mode, I would have to click my sidebars here to see the translate, rotate, scale options here, or use hotkeys. Whereas in 2.8, they're icons, and then you scroll over them to see what they're called. So that's what I was talking about by more user friendly, is you don't have to use hotkeys anymore, and you don't have submenus. You have actual buttons to click on. And then over here, once the item is selected in the scene, you get the item, and then you see your transforms here. In 2.7, once an object is loaded, the transforms is here, and you have a whole lot of other options in here. Your 3D cursor and your transforms and other options are all right here in one spot. And then as you can see, the icons have changed. So this is the old icons, and this is the new icons. So if you want to get rid of this, just like in 2.7, you can push the letter T and it moves that out of the way. If you forgot what letter it was, then you can use the little side arrow to bring it back. And the box that's around this is invisible, but it's right here. And you can drag it out of the way. So you can also change it to be wider so you can actually read what the things say. Or you can just shrink it back. as far as getting rid of windows, it all is the same as it was in 2.7. But you have to click in these corner places where it's rounded over to move them or bring in new ones. Which, I've never really liked that it's so freaking small that you have to fight with it to get it to do its thing. Whereas in here, they actually had, hey, this is the corner, you know, let's get it out of the way. Let's bring something new in. Alright, so in 2.7, the clipping is on this menu right here. And 2.8, it's in view, and it's right here. So, in 2.79, all of your tools are right there. And the transform tools are up there, and merge is down there. And then you had weight tools down here that you could have been using, but you typically would have to load in a third-party script to do weight smoothing groups, which I have on this one. Whereas 2.8, say all your tools are here, and if you want to actually get your words back to read them, you just drag this menu over, and you can actually read what it says. Or if you prefer the icons, just, drag it back. Okay, so I'm going to go into object mode here. With the item selected, I'm going to push Shift D, as in dog, to create a second cube. And I'm going to use the move tool and move this out of the way. So now in edit mode, I'm going to select my vertexes and see I have two objects in the scene. I'm going to select that corner. Come on. Of course. Well, I clearly forgot how to edit both of them at the same time. I dove into this last week and just we're kind of winging it today. But, CG Guru on YouTube, he's already created a whole bunch of new and exciting tutorials related to playing around with 2.8. I would totally go over there and check him out. because he can show you all these cool features that 2.8 has to offer for us. Alright, so that's the dive back into 2.8 compared to 2.7. So you can pause, play back, go back, look at different things, and now you know where all the crap moved from 2.7 to 2.8. So you'll be able to get your old workflow back together for modeling in 2.8 if you choose to model in 2.8, which, yes, there's a new learning curve to learning where everything disappeared to, but once you learn where everything is, you will love working in the EV engine over cycles. And now, I should probably mention one thing that really sucks is you can make things in 2.7 and load them into 2.8 and export the objects. But you can't create things in 2.8 and then bring it into 2.7 and try to export. So you can go forward compatibility, but not backwards compatibility. So keep that in mind. If you've only been able to get static or animated objects to work in ACSII, then I would not use 2.8 because 2.8 no longer supports ASCII, exportation to FBX. So if you're a user that was 100% dependent on ASICs, that's what I call it, ASICs 2, then making the switch to 2.8 isn't worth it for you. Or if you're a new user and you just got your fresh 2.8 and you're trying to get a TMTK item to work with binary export and it's not working at all for you, then I would go back and download 2.79 and try to export that object as ACSII and see if you can get it to work. And if it does, then unfortunately for you, 2.8 is not compatible with your system for making TMTK items. You'll have to use 2.79 and export using ASCII. And we haven't actually figured out in the TMTK community why this happens. We just know that it does. I'm leaning over towards individual user rigs. Something to do with either their graphics card, their motherboard, or some other kind of asset inside of their system is causing this bug when they're uploading. We haven't been able to pinpoint it. We've talked to Frontier and they haven't been able to figure it out either. We just know that some people binary works for them, other people only ASCII works for them. Some people both work. So, and then there is a small community of users that are using 3ds Max and are using Maya to do their modeling. Some people are using Mudshop. Some are trying to use Mumbo, but as far as I could tell, Mumbo doesn't actually work, even though it is a nice UI. But yeah, Maya does work, and 3ds Max does work for TMTK. But your objects have to be static. Alright, well, I hope this was helpful for you guys. I know it was all over the place, but you do have the option to push the stop and go back over something. So I guess that's the great thing about, video tutorials and walkthroughs is you always have the option to push stop, go back, click on something, reread. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment. I do read them. I may not reply to them, but I do read them. And if you plan on being a content creator or you have proof of being a content creator, you're always welcome to join my Discord, which is Planet Coaster Theme Makers. We have a ton of theme makers, modelers, and we do help each other. That is our golden rule. We are out to help each other. We're not there to make fun of, criticize, or otherwise. And I do float around other communities, so you may see me floating around and discussing things. So thank you guys. Have a great day, and as always, I look forward to seeing what you create. Have fun. Thank you. Goodbye.